Can you hear me?
Morning, Carla.
Hi.
Oh, Clara. Sorry, I thought it
Clara.
was Carla for a second.
You hear me? You hear me all right?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yes? Fantastic. So thank you very much, Richard, for being here with us today. Thank you to everyone that is joining and that has registered to this webinar. I'm very excited about this webinar. I think it was a very needed webinar. This subject has been asked for by several of you. Several users have been asking questions about email and SAP Business One and how it works. So we're very, very excited to be able to share with you. Give me just a second. You are all muted by default, but if you have any questions for us during the webinar, you can send them through the Q&A feature in Zoom or using the chat, and we will get to them by the end of the webinar. Okay, so I think we can get started here. So today, this webinar is going to be led by Richard Calvo. He's the lead technical consultant at Consensus International, and I'm super grateful for him for preparing this content and for sharing it with us today. He has a very, very busy schedule. You probably know if you've worked with him. He's our head firefighter as well. So he's almost all the time with emergencies. So thank you very much, Richard, for making time for this today.
Sure.
For those of you who don't know me, my name is Clara Custodio. What I do here at Consensus is I lead customer experience. I really love my job and I live from your feedback. So I ask you that you please rate the contents of this webinar and that you send me suggestions for future webinars. That's how we build this webinar program. And also I wanted to let you know that today in the afternoon, you're going to be receiving an NPS survey from us, and that really also helped us improve the service. So I really appreciate your participation in those surveys. Today's session is being recorded, so you can share it later on with other colleagues, or you can go back to revisit all that Richard is going to be sharing with us today. All of you are muted, like I mentioned before, just so that we can guarantee the flow of the presentation. But you can send us questions at any time using the Q&A or also the chat if you prefer. Richard and myself, we will turn our cameras off now so that we are wise with the bandwidth. So let us stop our cameras. And today, Richard is going to be sharing, sorry about that. Richard is going to be sharing the differences between SAP Business One Mailer and Outlook integration, which are two different ways of using mail from SAP, of sending email from SAP. He's going to share with us a basic overview of the email setup process in both scenarios. He's going to show us how to send an email from SAP Business One, also in both scenarios. He's going to explain a little bit how you can use emails with alerts, how can you combine those, how to set an email signature for the emails that go out from SAP Business One, and even the possibility of automating sending email by documents from SAP by email in the moment that they are created. So that's also very powerful, as well as how to send multiple documents by email to a selected email group that you have previously predefined in SAP Business One. And last but not least, and I think this last bit of the webinar is going to be very useful for many of you, are a list of common email issues and troubleshooting steps to solve them. Okay, so again, thank you all for being here today. Thank you, Richard. And I'm going to stop sharing now so that you can share your content. Okay.
Okay, thanks, Clara.
Thank you.
My presentation should be up now. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so we'll get right into it. I'll go back to the slide here real quick where we talked about what we're going to discuss. So differences between SAP Business One and Mailer and the Outlook integration. So here are the major differences. If you are on a hosted environment and it's dedicated to yourself, you can have Outlook integration or B1 mailer service. Let's say that the B1 mailer service is available in all type of deployments that you may have. So that means if you have the servers in your in-house, if you have them hosted with a hosting company, or if you're using something like a cloud deployment where you're sharing the environment with other customers, you have this service available. But Outlook integration is only really available when you have access to the environment yourself, dedicated, because the Outlook integration obviously requires you to have Outlook installed on there. And when you have Outlook installed somewhere, your Outlook profile is in there. That's typically something that's not supported in a shared environment because we really don't want your personal data being in a shared environment with other customers. Okay. Now, when you have it installed on site or hosted, the only requirement to use Outlook integration is for you to have Outlook, the Outlook client from Microsoft installed, and a default profile already set up. Okay, so we'll take a look at how that looks in the next slide here. I just wanted to mention another difference here, and that is that when you have Outlook integration, it's a little bit harder for the administration team or your supervisor, for example, to modify or really check, monitor what you're sending out of Business One as far as emails. But when you have the B1 mailer service, there's a report that comes included in the system, and everything is logged inside the system. So if you're the sales team supervisor, for example, and you want to see quotes that are going out daily or by the week, you could run a report inside of Business One and you can see all of those emails that went out to what contacts and their attachments and content. You can't really do that with Outlook integration because the email goes directly through the user's Outlook profile. Okay, so there's cons there. All right, so there is a basic setup that you have to complete before you use either of the email solutions, right? And that basic setup has to do with your email address. So each user inside of SAP, this is the user setup here on the bottom left of the screen, has to have an email address configured under their user. If you don't have that, then there's no way for SAP to know what to set in the from when you send emails. Also, if you're going to send internal messages or internal emails in the system to other colleagues that have a Business One account, they have to have that configured there as well, because otherwise Business One will not know who to set in the two. Okay. All right, so that's it about this. There's actually another, this is a bonus that it's not required, but some people choose to use it. You can configure predefined text blocks. So these are what are called like canned responses or templates. So you might have seen, you sent an email to a support platform and you get back an automated response with some kind of predefined text. This is the same thing here. You can configure these in the system, and then you can insert these into specific marketing documents or reports. That way, when you press the email button, you don't have to start typing the email subject and body and everything from scratch. You could have a template and you just replace maybe the document number or the contact name or something simple in the template. Saves you a lot of time. It's good for things like terms and conditions or these, legal texts that some people use. We'll go over how to set that up a little bit later. All right, so that's the common stuff that needs to be set up. Now let's talk about what you would need for Outlook integration. So like I said, you would have the Business One client and the Outlook client on the same machine. Yourself or your IT, it's really recommended your IT helps you set up your profile in that case for Outlook, which really just means running Outlook at least once. It'll create a default profile and it'll ask you to add a mailbox. So it'll tell you put in your email address and your password. Outlook creates that mailbox, and then you're at the normal Outlook screen that says inbox, sent emails, stuff like that. Once that is configured, then you're good to go on the Outlook side. And the next thing that you have to do is set up Business One to use Outlook integration. So Outlook integration is what's called a Business One add-on. And as you may or may not know, each Business One add-on is assigned to a particular company. So if you have 3 different companies, you would have to go to each one, enable this add-on, and make sure it's running for your user in order to use Outlook integration and make sure that your emails go out through your Outlook. Okay. Here's what that looks like in the add-on administration. So like we said, this is for dedicated environments where you have access to this stuff. So in add-on administration, you just turn on Outlook integration. It's an add-on that comes by default. It's provided by SAP. Then you make sure it's connected. So the next time you log on to the company, it should be connected. There's a setting down here when you have Outlook integration running. You can have Outlook integration running, but that doesn't mean that you have to send it through Outlook. It gives you the option. But there's a setting down here, which is a per user setting, where you can tell it, hey, I'm always going to want to send it through Outlook integration. So go ahead and have this marked by default for me. And that's here under administration, add-ons, Outlook integration, default settings. Like I said, it's a per user setting. So each user would have to make this choice at least one time. Okay, here's a little overview of how you would send an email from Outlook integration. We'll go over a demo later, but let's just get through these slides. So basically, you're on any document in the system. There is this icon on your toolbar that looks like an envelope. You press it, you get the pop-up for sending messages. So by default, this is populated with the, I'm sorry, by default, this is populated with the email address for the default contact on the marketing document. So you'd see here, I'm sending an email to the boss or my boss. And here's what's new. When you have Outlook integration running, you have a checkbox down here that says send email via MS Outlook. Since in the previous slide, we went and we configured that as a default, this is always going to be checked by default. But you have the option of unchecking it to send it through SBO mailer, which is what we'll talk about next. So here you would hit send, and the only thing that happens is this email is immediately handed off to the Outlook client of your logged in session. That goes into your outbox. Outlook sends it. That goes into your sent messages. Nobody else can see that. It's not recorded inside of Business One, which is one of the cons that we mentioned earlier. But you can see right here, it goes into that sent items in your Outlook profile. You actually do not have to have Outlook open at all, by the way. Once you've done the initial configuration, you can have Outlook closed on the machine, and it will just send through the Outlook on the machine for your default profile. All right, so that's it for Outlook integration. Next, we'll talk about Business One Mailer. This is the service that is the underlying service provided by SAP, and it is available in all kinds of deployments. There's not a lot to configure here. As you can see, if we go into general settings services, we basically check some boxes to turn it on. And the only information that we set on the Business One or SAP side is really this email service information, what's called an SMTP server, a port, if it requires authentication or not. These details are specific to your company. There's no way for consensus to know what these details are. And whoever manages your email servers in-house, imagine you weren't using Business One at all, whoever manages those servers and services has to provide these details and make whatever relevant configurations are necessary in order for SAP to relay data from SAP to the service, and then the service hands it off. Imagine you are going to USPS, you have a letter, you hand it off to USPS, it's now USPS's job to deliver that. It's the same kind of thing. Business One just kind of relays it to the service, and then that other service takes care of delivering that email for you. Okay. So we'll go here and we'll look at how you send emails from Business One using the Business One mailer. Well, guess what? It's actually the same process. You'll go to a document, you'll press this button, you'll get the pop-up here. And notice that if you're running the add-on, you'll still get this option to send it via MS Outlook. If you're not running the add-on, you will not get this option. And by the add-on, I mean Outlook integration. Basically, if you want to send it through the mailer service, you would just uncheck this. What happens then is that instead of this going into your Outlook sent or outbox, you can check it here with this icon on your toolbar, which is your messages and alerts overview. When you send a message, it'll go into your outbox, just like if it was Outlook, but really is inside of Business One. And there's a service in the background called the Business One Mailer that checks every so often, maybe like a minute or so, and sees if there's anything in the queue to send. It attempts to send it only by relaying it to that service that was configured in general settings earlier. So it just hands it off, and that service will either say, okay, I took care of it, or I had a problem. If it had a problem, down here you'll see an X. If it took care of it, you'll see a check mark. And then that's it. Business One is done at that point. All it did was relay it to that service. So it's the same way to send the email. You'd just track it in different places and you'd have visibility in different places. Okay, so that's how you send normal email messages inside of Business One. Now we can talk about alerts and emails. So some of our customers set up alerts in the system. Not everybody uses it, but our alerts are really just predefined queries that will run on an interval. And when they have a result for the query, it will then say, hey, I need to notify somebody of this result. So you can notify somebody internally by checking the box here for internal, and that'll send a message to that messages overview window, which we saw in the last slide here. So that'll go into the inbox here. Okay. You can also check the box for email, and that same email service will attempt to send an email to the destination user. When you're using alerts, alerts does not work through Outlook integration. The reason for that is that Outlook integration, it's something that's triggered by you, by your logged in account. But these alerts are just a service sitting in the background running queries, and then the system sends an email. So the from in that case won't be your user. It won't be your user in SAP. It'll be the email address that's configured for the company and company details. So I'll show you that as well. But basically, when you set up a company, you say, my company name is so and so, my address is so and so, my phone number and email are this. So that is the email that's going to be in the from when you receive an email from alerts. Okay. So that's for the basic built-in part. If you also want to be receiving messages like approval messages when there's an approval procedure, you want to receive that in your inbox in SAP, but you also want to receive a copy in your email, in whatever email client you may use. You can open the alerts and messages overview window. There's a button that says out of office. You can check that, and then you can have the incoming messages forwarded to your email. So what happens is anytime somebody sends you an internal message inside of SAP, or the system sends you an internal message inside of SAP, you'll also receive a copy in your email. Again, this is a service doing it, not your Outlook integration. So the email from will be the email from the company in company details, okay? And it will go through that Business One mailer service. So basically that Business One mailer service will be the underlying system that will send the emails. So that has to be working for these to be working for the internal messages or alerts to really reach you. Okay. So here we're talking about email signatures. So through both of the systems, actually, through the B1 mailer and Outlook integration on the latest versions, you can define an email signature. This can be either at the common level. Common means any company inside of your installation. So if you have an installation with, 4 or 5 different companies, they'll all use the same email signature that you set up here for common email signature if you choose this box. If you want to set it at the company level, then you can set it at the company level, and then it'll be individual email signatures based on which company you're logged into, or by user level like we did here. So in my example, I said, hey, I want to use the user signature, and this is my user signature. So this is specific to your user. If another user logs on, they can set their own user signature here. Okay. All right. So earlier, Clara was mentioning something about automation. It's not full automation, but it is kind of a shortcut. It reminds you to always send an email on these particular documents. So you have the ability to go into print preferences in the system, and you can choose by document type. So this will list the different marketing documents, for example, sales order, delivery, invoice, things like that. And you can say, when I press add on the button, on the document, and that's successful. Business One typically says you successfully added the document, and you get like a green bar on the status there. You can have the system automatically either print a document as well, the layout for the document, or export a PDF. This is kind of like when you press the PDF button or the attachment button, and also email. So it'll just press the little email icon on the top left of the toolbar that we were looking at, and you'll get that pop-up with the predefined text if you have anything in there, and then you can press send. So it doesn't automatically send it for you. It just makes sure to follow these steps, and you could have it where it prints the document as soon as you add it, and also, hey, you should email this to the contact. So that's what this option does for you. This is built into the system. All right. So next, there are certain reports in the system which allow you to batch send. So in the past, this wasn't available. And for example, you had somebody on your team creating these Asian reports and manually sending one by one to the accounting contact or somebody, or AP at the customer, right? At your customer. Now there's a system in here where you can batch send these. So basically, for example, the customer receivables aging, you could run this, you'd get your results set, you'd pick a subset of these. If you have a very, very large pool of customers, you maybe don't want to pick 10,000 invoices to send, right? That's going to take a while to generate, because when you do that, it's going to run the Crystal report in the background. It's going to save that PDF in the background, and it's going to generate an email for each one. So you maybe want to do this in batches if you have a large amount, right? So anyway, you'll select these entries here by clicking on one, holding shift, and then clicking up to where you want to select the range. Then on your toolbar, you will hit File, Send. You can pick one of these options, either Business One Mailer or Outlook. And then if you've defined email groups in the system, you can choose to send to email groups, or if you uncheck this, it'll look for the default contact on the business partner. What is an email group? Basically, an email group is a system since 9.3 that allows you to say, you know, two of the contacts in my business partner, you might have 10 contacts, two of them are in the AP group, for example, accounts payable. So that's the person that I want to send these agent reports to. And then you just go to all your business partners and you set the appropriate contact into the appropriate group. And when you do that, it'll filter here the results to the people in those groups. So if you have two contacts in that group, you'll have two lines here because it'll send the same email to two different people. Okay. On the bottom here, you'll see the result set. And this, at this stage, gives you the option again. It says, hey, these people are in this group. We're going to send email to them, but you have the option to uncheck that. You have the option to say, I actually don't want to send to this person because maybe they're the CEO or something and I don't want to bother them. And you also have the option to then change your predefined text that you have configured here, or you can just leave it exactly how it is. So like, hi, you know, you can change that text and send. Then there's a send button, which is not in the screenshot, but basically that'll go through and iterate through each one of these entries and send that email for you. All right, so we're at the end here. And maybe before we get into this, let's stop this and just go do a quick demo. So here's my business one. And I'll just show you quickly. Well, first, let's look at where the configuration is for the company-wide email. So that's in company details here. And this is the email address that it will take when you send something, when you receive something from alerts or a forwarded email. Okay, that's there. This up here is the personal inbox, outbox, and sent messages. So this is only for your user. Nobody else can see this stuff in here. All right, so if you go to a document and we press the email button, you'll get this pop-up. And this pop-up is the one that says, what is the subject? So I don't have a predefined text here. So I'll just say test, for example, and I'll press send at this point. When I press send, you see it says operation completed successfully. And I can check over here, and there should be something in my outbox from right now. Might take a little bit. Like I said, there's a service in the background that kind of polls or checks periodically for something in the queue, and then it processes and sends it. So we'll just wait a second here.
Richard, while we
Yes.
wait, can you mention what version of SAP you are showing us, you're using for the demo?
Sure. So right now I'm just using version 10. It might look a little different from what you guys have seen. That's just because this is the SQL version, which uses a skin called Golden Thread, I believe. Yeah. So this Golden Thread, it
Okay.
makes it like gray and the colors are popish and stuff. You
Okay.
might have the blue Belize, I think it's called, which is the one for HANA. It's more like
Mm-hmm.
a blue color and stuff like that. So we can see now here that this message has gone out at 9:53. You don't see it right there, but I can show you that it came into my other. So let me just share this here. You should see that it came into right here. Can you see this, Clara?
Yes.
Okay, so this was sent internally through the internal mailer. And this is just a small sandbox SMTP client. It's just for testing. So that's why it looks so weird. But here's the message. It says test. It came from what is defined as my name here in Business One. It just says B1 user, right? And here's my email address that I defined in Business One. So, and it also went to myself because I sent it to myself. All right. And you can see down here, it says I'm the user. This is the email signature that was defined in the email signature settings here for me. So that's the email signature. So give me just a sec here, and I will reshare Business One. Okay, so now I'll close that, and we will just start up Outlook integration so we can take a look at how it looks on Outlook integration. So now if I do the same exact process, we'll see here test and test. Now I have this checkbox for send email via MS Outlook. I press send. It should say the operation ended successfully, which means it's sent through MS Outlook. And I actually did not have my Outlook client open, so I'm going to try to open that real quick and show you that it then goes into your Outlook. So if we look here, I'm in my sent emails, sent items here. You can see here's the message just sent right now, the test. Okay. So we can go back to the presentation, I believe. Oh, this is not the right one, sorry. So here we were. Can you see the PowerPoint presentation?
Yes.
Okay, so we're back at the presentation here, and now we can talk about common issues. So what I showed you, everything worked, right? But we know that that's not how it always goes. So these are common tips that apply to both the B1 mailer and also the Outlook integration. So you might try to send an email in Business One, and you just get a big fat error message here that says something. In this case, we're looking at something that to me is pretty specific. It says, hey, I can't send the email. You have to define an email address for the sender because I don't know who you are if your user doesn't have an email address. So you just go in there into your email. You can press this button that looks like a person icon, and every user has access to this icon from 9.3 onwards. And you will set your own email address. And then you try to send the email again, and it should work. All right. This one here is specific to Business One Mailer. And Business One Mailer, for those of you who are on a shared environment, this is typically what's on there because Outlook integration is not available, right? So we have a lot of problems sometimes when we're in the implementation phase where we're trying to configure this email. And basically, I showed earlier that there's really not a lot to set in Business One. So if you give us some information or you place some information in that configuration screen and you try to send an email, but it stays in the outbox forever, or it just says processing, or it gives you this red X, this means that the email service from Business One, the mailer, tried to relay or hand off that message to your external email service like Office 365, Google Apps, a hosted Exchange, Yahoo Mail, whatever it may be, and it failed over there. Okay. So this is something that has to be reviewed with IT for the customer. And we would really need IT to be the one that goes through the logs on that side because we don't have any access to that and figure out why that's failing. So that could be a permission issue. That could be a license issue. It could be any number of issues. So we work in tandem with the IT provider that you're using in order to resolve this kind of issue. All right, so for Outlook integration though, you might have some different issues, and those have to do with, hey, you're now using two separate programs to send an email. So Business One generates that email, but then it gives it to Outlook, and Outlook might not like that. So there's some settings here, and we'll share this presentation with you, but there's some settings here that you have to ensure are correct. The first thing is your Business One client and your Outlook client have to be running on the same machine. If you have it installed on your machine, fine. If you have it installed on a remote desktop, fine. The other thing is Outlook has a setting in trust settings that says allow other programs to send messages on my behalf. And that has to be configured. So that's something that your IT administrator does. They run it with full permissions, they set the setting, and then it's good to go for the client. Okay, it's good to go for Outlook client. Um, you can see that in Business One when you try to send a message and this isn't configured. You'll see a red error message like you see on the bottom right of the screen here that says BO269 failed to send the email message via Microsoft Outlook. Okay, so that's one of the common errors that we get there. Uh, there's another error message that looks almost the same here. And this one happens when you, for example, run one of the two programs in a different context. And what that means is sometimes you'll right click an icon and you'll hit run as administrator. And that really runs it as a different context. So if you did that for the Business One client and not for Outlook, then they can't communicate. Or if you did it for Outlook and not the Business One client, then they can't communicate. So you should make sure you do the same for both, either run it regular for both or run them both as admin. Okay, then you won't have this error message over here. Finally, there are logs for the internal mail service. So that you only have access to this, obviously, if you have a dedicated environment for you. But here are the log locations for SQL, anybody that might have a SQL installation, and the one for HANA. These logs over here help to identify when an email message was attempted to be sent. And the typical things, I should have included that here, but that we'll see in those logs are something like invalid email address, or can't authenticate with the server, or your user does not have permission to send as this other user. So those are all kind of things that we need IT to really look into and help us resolve. Otherwise, the email cannot go out. So I think that's it. This is the end of the presentation. Clara, I think you have something you wanted to talk about, or maybe if there's any more questions in the QA, we could address those now.
Yes, thank you, Richard. Thank you so much for the presentation. And we do have some questions. So the first one, I think you already mentioned this during the presentation, but one of the attendees asked if this is based on an add-on or if it comes with basic SAP Business One. And I think you mentioned that it is an add-on that comes with SAP Business One, correct?
That's correct. Yeah. Outlook integration itself is provided by Business One. So it's going to be available in every version, as far as we know, or for the foreseeable future, on every version of Business One. It's just a matter
Okay.
of turning it on for the company.
Okay. Okay, fantastic. So another user is asking, can you go over the steps to create a custom template text for certain emails? For example, a sales order
Sure.
or anything.
Yeah, sure. I can show that here. So we'll just look at Business One again,
Okay.
and you should be able to see the screen now, yeah?
Yes.
Okay, so over here in administration, system initialization, print preferences, we can go down here. And like I mentioned, you have the list per document here or per report. This per report applies to like the aging report. So per document, you can pick the different documents in the system. So we'll pick sales order, for example, and you could check that box for email document. So actually, I'll show that real quick. So I'll check that box. And then also permanent remarks for printing here for something else. But if you go down, you'll see email subject and email body. So you could go in here, you can type something, right? And something else. And these would be the texts that show up when you press the email button on a sales order. But you can also go in here to insert predefined text, and you can either pick one that you've created or you can create a new one. And that new one could be my terms, for example, and it'll say,
Okay.
please pay within, I don't know, 6 days of receipt. This is just a sample text here, but you could have this and then you can insert it into both this document and any other document in the system that supports this predefined text thing. So you don't have to keep typing this stuff over.
Okay.
And so I'll just hit update here, and I got an error down there. I'm trying to move the zoom window, and it says failed to load image. That's just because I don't have the logo thing on my company set up correctly, so that's why
Oh,
we're getting
okay.
that error. But okay, so I could maybe like duplicate this document. Oh, and this is just so we check the box for when you add to send it. So if I hit
Mm-hmm.
add here, I haven't set a delivery date. There's a zoom pop-up in the middle of my screen that doesn't let me see real good what we're doing.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. You're doing
Okay,
fine.
so that was, can you go over the steps to create? So I'll mark this as answered live.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, great.
And then is it possible to include a logo in the email signature? Yes. So if we go down here to email settings, it says, um, I'm sorry, the zoom window is still stuck in the way. One sec.
Don't worry.
Email settings. So it doesn't say so right here,
Mm-hmm.
but if you were to go to this window, and Business One has context sensitive help, so you can press F1 and it'll open the help, or you can go here to the documentation and click online help, which should take
Mm-hmm.
you to the online help. There's also some SAP links here. Or
Okay.
if you'd always like the very latest one available, actually you can see it here. If you like the very latest one available, you can Google on help.sap.com. You can look for a Business One product, and it has all of the latest documentation in a nice HTML format. But it says, no, you can
Okay.
insert your text in HTML format except for the following tags: HTML and body. So basically it's already wrapping all of this in an HTML and body tag. So
Okay.
if you wanted a logo, you could, for example, add an image source tag and put the online address for that image that you're hosting somewhere, right? My logo, .png, or whatever it may be. So it's
Okay.
HTML, so you can put that in there, and then that'll be included in the message. However, note that different email clients, like maybe you're using Outlook, or maybe you're using Thunderbird, or maybe using some kind of different email client, they
Mm-hmm.
handle these links differently. So for example, in Outlook, sometimes you might get the message, but it'll say, hey, we removed the images. So the user has to
Okay.
click a little button that says to add the images and stuff like that. So that's something
Okay.
for you to play with, but yes, that's supported.
Okay. Fantastic. So we have another question asking, is there a maximum capacity per email sent in gigabytes?
I think that that depends on your email service, right? So like I think some time ago when we were using emails, it was something like 4 to 5 megs. If you included something more than that, then the email service would kind of reject it. So it really depends now. I don't know what that number is now because I've sent
Okay.
bigger things in email and it has gone through, but should be fine.
Okay. Okay, so we have a last question that says, what if I want to program a report to run at a specific time and email it automatically to someone?
You can do that. So I think hold on just a second. So I answered these other questions. Can you put HTML user signature? Yeah, you can put HTML in all of them, not just the company and common. Sorry about that, Buffy. Yes, you can. So what was the question about scheduling? Yes.
Yes.
The for SQL installations, the way that works is something called query print layout for
Okay.
SQL installation. So I don't have that. I don't have anything ready here to show you, but basically you can set up these reports in PLD. They're not in
Mm-hmm.
Crystal. So this is for what's included with SAP, right? You can set up
Okay.
these reports in PLD definition, which if you go to a layout here, you'll see there's Crystal reports and PLDs. PLDs are those older looking ones, like they look like this instead of a crystal. But if this is what you use, that's fine. You can set up a layout like this, and then you can schedule that in that same system here. If I had a report actually on this list, I would click it, and there's a button that says like schedule. Let me check on the query manager as well. So you can like schedule. I don't have, it says there's no report, so the report is missing. But
Mm-hmm.
if you create it, you can schedule that, and then the system, that same mailer service, will send that on the schedule that you define. So you set up something like an interval of when it'll send and stuff like that. That's for SQL version. For
Okay.
HANA version, there is a completely separate system called the analytical portal, which replaces that functionality. And the
Okay.
analytical portal enables you to schedule reports to
Mhm.
specific users, but those users are static. This is the important point here. Those users are static. So when you set up the report, you say this report is going to run. It could be either a Crystal report, an Excel report, or any of the analytical content that the system provides for you in HANA versions.
Mhm.
So that means those you can run those cubes and send them, right? Um, but the destination is always static. So if you set it up for user one and user two, that's
Yes.
always who it's going to send to. There's no functionality to, hey, pick up the contact on the document or something, because really
Oh,
you're running reports, not documents,
okay.
and dynamically assign two addresses. There's no
Okay.
functionality for that. So you would set up static. So maybe you could use it for like the sales manager needs a sales report every Friday at 5 p.m. So you could set it for
Mhm.
something like that. And then it's a
Okay.
static thing that runs and sends out.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Richard, for that. So we have another question from an attendee who says, I have already created a distribution group to send AR invoices to customers. In the print preferences, the email document box is checked. Does this mean that invoices will automatically be sent, including the attachment, or will I still have to do that manual selection process of selecting the various documents?
In print preferences, when you check the email document box, that only triggers the pressing of the email button when you add the document. So if you just added the invoice, right? If you just
Mhm.
added the invoice, it'll automatically bring up the box that says, this is the email message. And it'll automatically have the destination of the default contact on the business partner. So if you go to a business partner, you have some contacts, but one of them is default. Whoever that default is the one that is brought over. I'm not showing the screen here. I'm sorry, but
No,
it's
you
the
are.
one. It's the. I'm showing business one here.
Yes, yes, you are.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So that's the contact that will come over here. In this case, this fake customer doesn't have any, but this is the contact that will
Mhm.
come up in the email address. So if you, like you said, you set up a distribution group, which
Mhm.
I'm not sure if you mean that you set up an what's called an email group, or if you set up a distribution list, which is when you manually go and you select contacts and you add them to a particular list.
Mm.
You still have to select that on the pop-up that comes up, because the pop-up that comes up selects the default contact, not a distribution list. So you would still go there and hit add on that
Okay.
pop-up. So let me just maybe show here. You can hit add recipient. And if you had a distribution list, which is what I'm understanding you set up, you can just check that box and press OK. And the distribution list would come in here. You have to do that manually.
Okay.
So that's how it works for the built-in solutions. If you need more complex email sending things, like something that you can schedule that has dynamic content, that has dynamic email addresses and all of that, there are
Mhm.
solutions out there to do that as well.
Okay. Okay, good. Well, thank you very much, Richard. I think we don't have any other questions. Um, we are going to be sending you a link where you can revisit this video, and we are also going to work on a document and send you the presentation that Richard put together. Um, I wanted to remind everyone that we are working on our website and we're adding more content daily to the resources page. So I highly recommend you to check that out. You can find very interesting information there. And that's all from us today. Thank you very much, Richard. Thank you all for being here, and I hope you enjoyed this content. Please let us know on the survey that is going to pop up right after we close this webinar, and send us suggestions for other content that you might be interested in. As Richard was mentioning, if your needs for email are more sophisticated, there are other products out there, so you can always contact us, and we can introduce those other add-ons for you. Okay, and if you have any questions regarding this presentation, please reach out as well. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful day. Bye, Richard.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.